Okay, everybody, welcome back to the Land Commander Gulf War 3 update for today, March 26, 2026. It's Thursday evening here where I am, so I don't know if I'll even get it up this evening. It might be on Friday morning. Either way, first and foremost, I just want to say I'm still calling it for Friday as with the arrival of the Tripoli Amphibious Ready Group, that the real push to get the Strait back under U.S. control and authority will really kick off, along with the other arrival of forces in region. So I'm just calling that right now. And with everything that's going on, you know, I'll probably try to get another video out tomorrow. We'll see. But what I do want to do before we get into some of the day-to-day, blow-by-blow highlights is I do want to take some time to actually discuss some of the reasons we've gotten into ourselves into this conflict. And we're probably not going to talk about all of them. But, you know, there's a lot of ideas out there about why this happened. One of the big ones I hear often is it's about the Epstein files, you know, either people trying to distract everybody from them, or that somebody in another nation or a group has other files that they're using to manipulate people into doing things. I mean, I'm not saying there aren't people in the national security apparatus who maybe do see this as a benefit to getting some distraction going on from the Epstein files. I'm not saying there isn't somebody thinking that, but I don't think that's a primary or secondary or even tertiary driver of what we're doing. I'm just putting that out there right now. One of the big things, though, that is driving this conflict and is sort of a big picture, long-term issue that drives a lot of things that the empire does, really comes from the fact that the empire has this machinery that gets focused on certain things for very long periods of time and builds up a lot of internal momentum for that. And Iran is a great example of that. You could argue that the Pentagon has been the Pentagon has been preparing for war in Iran, with Iran, for essentially 40 years, since the fall of the Shah and the taking of the embassies and the collapse of relations with Iran, and Iran emerging not just as a disobedient to the empire member of the global community, but also a perpetual thorn in the side of the empire. I mean, from very early on, you know, the hostages in the embassy, and then you know, the bombing of the embassy or the Marine barracks in Beirut in the 80s, support of all kinds of proxies that poke at us directly and indirectly through our allies and our interests in the region. So yeah, we've been getting ready to this for a long time. There's been a lot of built up momentum in inertia inside the Pentagon and inside the national security apparatus to do this for 40 years. And I would say I'm actually surprised in some ways it hasn't happened sooner. I really am sort of surprised by that. And you could go even a little further. Like, not only has the Pentagon really been gearing up for war, the United States has been very interested in Iran going even further back, going back to World War II, and the broader Middle East going back for World War II. And the imperial powers that we inherited all that from, France, Britain primarily, they were super interested in that region. In fact, people have been interested in this part of the world for a very, very long time, which feeds into that momentum at the Pentagon over the last 40 years. So why is that? Well, of course, there's all the oil and natural gas. Of course, that makes it incredibly important. There is also the fact that, you know, just look at this map. Look at where this part of the world is. Not only do you have these countries that are rich in oil and natural gas, hydrocarbons that fuel the world, 20% of the world's oil coming out of here, and has for many decades, but just it's at the crossroads of everything, and has been, you know, forever, right? I mean, I guess, you know, back when it was Pangea, it was something, you know, it was something different, but as long as humans have been doing stuff, this has been at the crossroads of everything. So it's always been an important part of the world. Any power, any great power that existed anywhere around here, or as technology-enabled empires to take on a more global, cross-ocean nature and dimension, you know, became of interest to everybody. And then you add the oil that was discovered, you know, in the early part of the 20th century. And it's just, yeah, the importance of this region is almost, it's just self-evident. So when the British and French empires were coming to an end and we inherited that mantle, that imperial burden and ambition and all the great things and all the terrible things that come with becoming the new hegemonic power in this super important part of the world, that's always been super important, is even more so with all the oil that's there, which helps explain why there's always been conflict and there's always been a lot of potential and there's always been a lot of conflict in this region going way back. And it's because everybody wants a piece of it in a sense. So that and the oil drive our deep interest in the region broadly, and Iran also. I mean, Iran's territorial, where it exists on the globe is very strategically important as well. It has tremendous oil and natural gas resources. The British before us were heavily involved there. They even invaded Iran, I'm pretty sure, with the Russians back in World War I to secure the oil and gas in Iran. You get to the 50s, right, and you get this guy over here. You get Kermit Roosevelt, and in August of 1953, he led a CIA operation to overthrow Mohammad Mossadegh, who was the leader of Iran at the time, and did that with the support and help of the British, and did so because Mossadegh had nationalized the oil industry. And guess who wasn't too stoked about that? Well, like BP wasn't too stoked about that. BP basically existed prior to this guy coming along to suck oil out of Iran on behalf of the British. So the British didn't really like it when that was nationalized. The Americans didn't really like that, so we went in and took care of this. We put in the Shah, who was a pretty oppressive, not super great leader, who was a good ally in a sense from a geopolitical chess game perspective to the United States, but was not a great ally to, was not a great leader to his people. Eventually, his regime fell in the late 70s. Our embassy was taken, as you may know. Hostages were held for a very long time. Carter let the Shah into the United States actually after he had been deposed to get cancer treatment, which triggered the seizing of the embassies. And then led to a perpetual state to this day of very tense, very sour relations with Iran. So our interest in this country goes way back. And our willingness to do kinetic things, right? Yeah, Kermit wasn't flying around in, F-35, A's dropping JDAMs. I get that, but still pretty kinetic when you go in and take. This was actual regime change. This, Trump talks about regime change. This guy Kermit got it done. Whether you think it was a good idea or not, he did do it. His special military operation actually worked. The special ed military operation we got going on, we're going to find out. Anywho, Shah goes, right, and relations break down with Iran. Tensions are very high. The Cold War is raging, and the Pentagon gets it in his head. I mean, I wasn't around, right? I wasn't there. I wasn't in the Pentagon in the 80s. Fighting the evil empire, but it is just hard for me to fathom that the Pentagon decided that what was going to happen is the Soviets high as fuck on invasion, as high as fuck on invading countries was going to push on in after going to Afghanistan, just push on in to the Middle East and the Gulf via Iran, a big land invasion of Iran and push on into the Gulf. And one of the context of that too is the Soviets historically never really had good inroads into the Gulf region. They always wanted them, they just really never could get traction there. And we did things actively throughout the Cold War to make sure the Soviets could not gain footholds in the region. And so when the Pentagon got convinced that, this is what was coming, they drew up these wild plans for the United States as the Soviets were racing down out of Central Asia and whatnot, and out of Azerbaijan into this huge country, Iran, that's mountainous and very difficult to invade, that the United States, which at this time, in 2026, we sort of take for granted the United States has all these bases throughout the Gulf region and the broader Middle East. That was really not the case in the early 80s, 79, going, you know, into the late 80s. So this plan really called for some wild stuff. This is, oh yeah, here's a map of how they thought the Russians were gonna go. I mean, look at this. This is what they thought was gonna happen. What do they say here? Phase 1, it's gonna take them about a week to take Tehran. It's a pretty, I mean, boy, the Pentagon had some pretty high, really thought highly of the Soviet military, you know? And look, I mean, they look terrifying in a lot of ways. I don't blame them. The Soviets were equally twacked out by us, right? I mean, both sides were really convinced the other one was really ferocious and going to do wild things. And they were both ferocious. I'm not saying they weren't, but this is insane. This idea that the Soviets are going to make it and take Tehran in a week. And then, as they say, 34 more days to get to the Gulf and take the whole country. Are you kidding me? And I mean, let's not forget, the Iraqis fought a war for 8 or 9 years with the Iranians, and they border right there, and they couldn't take anything because they raced through the plains on the western flank of Iran, had success early on, racing their tanks and ground forces through these open desert plains, and then pretty quickly they hit the mountain ranges, came to a halt, and the Iranians were able to sort of drive them back, and it became this stalemate out there in the desert on the Iraqi-Iranian border for the next, you know, many years, and it was a terrible war. And if you don't know anything about the Iran-Iraq war, you should definitely go learn about it. There was a lot of wild stuff that went on, including, you know, this whole thing with Iran and the Contras in Nicaragua and Reagan selling weapons. Oliver North, if you don't know him, he gets in the mix. All of which to say, just again to reinforce my initial point that we've been thinking about this a long time. There's been a lot of inertia, and I'm sort of amazed that it didn't happen sooner, this level of kinetic action against Iran, because we've just been spinning up for this. So this is what, you know, the Pentagon was dreaming of the 80s. And yeah, here's a map of the plan for us to go, and the United States military to go stop the Soviets. You know, we're gonna flow all these forces in and launch these amphibious assaults onto the beaches of Iran and race up there and try to stop the Soviet. It would have been wild. Obviously, they didn't happen. But again, focus, laser focus. You know, like our good buddy Hex said, you know, just focus like a laser razor or whatever. Okay, so, you know, we come along, and then you can see this is also laying the groundwork for the current security architecture we find ourselves in, right? This is the basis that the United States was hoping to build to support this counteroffensive against the Russians. And, well, that's not really what got the bases built. It was a combination of Iran threatening shipping in the Gulf again, and us having to get involved in the tanker wars. Similar but different, for sure. And then obviously Saddam invading Kuwait in 1990 is what really got us all these bases and then allowed us to have them to this day. Not to say everything about what we did there was about Iran, but a lot of it was fueled by that. And I'll just say this, there's an aspect of what we're doing now that is the empire saying, look, everybody, it might take 40 years, but this country that not only got rid of our buddy boy, the Shah, the guy we put in, took our oil, heck, we even sold him F-14 Tomcats, ungrateful jerks. And not only did they do all that and become a disobedient member of the international order, but then they become an active thorn in our side for 40 years. So here it is, the empire is saying, listen, everybody, it might take 4 decades, but you act like this long enough, you keep poking us, we're gonna fuck you up. There's an aspect of that going on, right? There's an aspect of the empire's teaching a lesson. There's an aspect of all this in built up inertia. You know, here's the bases we got to build, right? So there's the ones we proposed. Here's what we wound up getting. Here's what we have today, right? Not verbatim, right? It wasn't we got exactly what we had thought we were going to need or get, but we got a lot. We got a lot. So, oops. Anyway, again, not all driven by Iran, but heavily driven by it for 4 decades. And then a lot more decades before that in a lot of other ways. And then, hey, let's not forget, I mean, 2002, there it is. There's George Bush, Dick Cheney, and, oh God, who the heck was that guy? Who was the fucking Speaker of the House back then? I don't remember, honestly. Dennis Hassert, maybe? Was that his name? Kind of looks like he wants to try to be diabetes cat guy. Anywho, here it is, right? President Bush outlines the axis of evil: Iraq, Iran, North Korea, right? Okay, there it was. I mean, I remember 02, 03 when Bush was getting us ready to, the global war on terror was going. We'd kicked in the door in Afghanistan. We were fucking around there. And Bush was spinning us up to go to Iraq. And it just seemed like, and he was talking about Iran all the time, talking about North Korea. And it seemed like, definitely, like, we're going to knock over Saddam. We'll regroup. And then, he'll find a reason for us to kick in the door and go after Iran, which didn't happen. But that seemed very likely. And I'm not the only one who thought that. And I'll even go as far as to say, I helped a friend of mine in, I think it was the spring of 06, write a paper for a college class. His assignment was write a policy paper, a policy recommendation, a paper recommending a policy to President Bush. And keep in mind, this was a pretty liberal school, so this might not have been as accepted by the professor as it was in this case. But anyway, my friend and I decided that we would recommend to President Bush that we stage, that the United States stage a dirty bomb nuclear attack at the Super Bowl and implicate Iran to justify a massive bombing followed by ground invasion, air campaign followed by ground invasion of Iran. And we went very in depth. We outlined, weapons platforms we would use, how you would go about doing the dirty nuke, how you might find plant evidence and take prisoners who could, give evidence and intel that implicated Iran in this attack. And here's the thing, it was this liberal, wacky school, but the only reason that the teacher would even entertain it is that it was palpable, the idea that Bush probably wasn't going to detonate a dirty nuke to do this, but was going to invade Iran next. This was 2002, right? Here we are 24 years later. So there's all this inertia built up in the system. And I'm gonna give you one more example to really ram this home. Here, you can't really see it very well. But okay, here it is. Last year, Operation Midnight Hammer, B-2 stealth bombers fly in, drop the big old, massive ordnance penetrating bombs, go in there, boom, hit the big Natanz nuclear facility, do all this damage, sort of the cherry on the top of the 12-day war that Israel had just waged. We kind of went in there and dropped that cherry of destruction on there. What's really interesting and what's really relevant to what I'm talking about is that the Pentagon said that there were two guys that worked in the Pentagon for over 15 years, basically doing nothing but studying these nuclear sites and updating strike plans to hit them. Going so far as to deciding that at some point back some years that the ordnance the United States possessed simply wasn't going to work. It wasn't going to destroy these facilities. So these two guys went and worked with industry and Air Force development teams to come up with the weapons we actually wound up dropping on them, the big massive ordnance penetrating munitions that the B-2 dropped. Okay, so if that's not totally obsessed and like seriously cocked and ready to go and just chomping at the bit, I don't know what is. I also marvel at the fact that the machinery of this empire is so vast that it can spare two guys for over 15 years to do nothing but get ready to hit a handful of nuclear targets in a country 10,000 miles away. And who knows who else was tasked with just studying and updating plans to attack Iran over all those years, right? Over 40 years. There's a lot of bureaucratic inertia built up to do this. And I really want to emphasize this because it's not like this is the only example of this in the United States currently, in the United States historically, and in the world historically. empires built, get these groups of people and groups of bureaucracies that become focused on certain imperial ambitions, imperial goals, imperial visions, and really just drive at them. And it can be hard to stop them. And especially if you actually start them, then it's really hard to stop them. That's the other thing. Once you let the genie out of the Pentagon bottle, it's really hard to put it back in. It's a lot easier to just not do it. Just let them plan and plan and plan and get ready. Once you let them go, then this whole new inertia takes over, the inertia of war, which you see play out all the time. I mean, Vietnam was a great example of that. Afghanistan was a great example of that. And then let's also not forget that you get this inertia to keep fighting, to fight the war initially, then to keep fighting it. And then when everybody keeps saying we want to be done with it, we want to get out, like in Afghanistan, the guy who comes along and finally gets us out oversees it, right? Biden. I mean, yeah, it was a shit show getting out of there. Of course it was going to be a shit show. No empire leaves 20 plus years of occupation without it being a shit show. But we were out of there, right? We were done. Yeah, it was sloppy. We left some stupid Blackhawks and it was trashed, and yeah, those Marines got killed. I mean, I'm not saying it wasn't a mess. But nonetheless, we were out. It could have been a lot worse. It's always a mess when empire leaves. And Biden just got nailed for it, right? So the machinery, once you get going, is just going to not relent at trying to keep it going. And Obama had this issue. He when he came into office, he wanted to get us out of Afghanistan. He began this review process after he came into office to try to figure out what to do about this mess over there. So he asked the Pentagon to draw up plans for what to do. And the Pentagon basically just came to him with 3 plans that were just modest variations of the same thing, like some more troops, medium more troops, or a lot more troops. Just a variation on the surge that we were, had just spun up in Iraq. I mean, okay, those are options, but it didn't really offer the president any real options, any real discussion of like, are there other actual paths forward other than just putting more troops in there and trying this counterinsurgency approach that's been, become all the rage in national security circles and is what we're trying in Iraq, right? All of this is important to remember because this is going to, these pressures, these bureaucratic and imperial inertias aren't going to go away when this conflict ends, whenever that is. They're going to continue to exist. And it's important that we remember that. It's important that we remember that it isn't just because Trump is in office that this kind of stuff can happen. And I'm not really convinced that if Kamala was president, we wouldn't be involved in this war right now. We'll never really know, but I'll say this, with all this inertia built up, all these hawks, and that's the thing too, it's not just in the Pentagon. There's all these hawks around Iran, in the media, in academia, at these think tanks, constantly for 40 years beating the drums of doing this. And we've come very close on multiple times. I'm not saying this is the only reason this happened, but this is a big part of it. Once the Israelis in the 12-day war demonstrated that they could, right? Even the Israelis are not the American Air Force and military. They're capable and competent, but they're not as big and powerful and mighty. I mean, the Israelis were able to kinetically wipe out vast amounts of the existing command and control and ISR assets and systems in Iran, in Hezbollah, in Hamas. They were able to begin conducting kinetic aerial operations and small ground operations with special forces and things like that all over Iran. We saw that in 2024, we saw that in 2025, culminating in the 12-day war. Even if Kamala had been president, we hadn't dropped the bombs on the nuclear site, I think suddenly Iran looked really tempting. I think the narrative began to build within the machinery of empire that look, they're kind of on the ropes now. Look, we can do it. The blowback has been manageable. We can do this. If we just escalate a little more, and more, we can do this. Now is the time, right? It becomes very seductive and very hard to not get lured into that. The temptation to act is in, especially when it feels and looks like maybe you could do it. I don't know that Kamala would have avoided getting sucked into that, especially with all the other things that that helped shape the all-dimension battle space, right? The information space, the physical space, all of that to really push the geopolitical landscape in this direction, to push the United States in this direction, which we'll talk about more in another episode. But I really do want to just emphasize that the machinery empire is spooled up to do a lot of things and has a lot of inertia to do a lot of things. And the Iran one was a big one. And we really need to not forget that and not just think, oh, if Orange Man's gone, this can't happen again. So, okay, yeah, moving right along. Oh yeah, here we go. Yep, a system that grows in complexity to justify its own existence, making decisions nearly impossible, right? Boxing decision makers, boxing the principals in, right? In the principal agent dynamic, right? In this case, the agent, right? The national security, the Pentagon, boxing the principal, the president in, and giving him, you know, maybe the illusion of some kind of choice. But yeah, you can put X number of troops in, a bit more troops or a bit more. That's it. That's all you got. And here's the thing too. Don't think the Pentagon isn't above leaking things to the press if it feels like, if they start to feel like, oh, the president's not gonna just be down with surging more troops in and playing around in the Afghan sandbox and doing coin for the next however many years. They did do that. That's exactly what happened. So, anywho. This has been kind of a long episode, so I'm going to just do a quick sort of recap of some of the bigger stuff that's going on. I want to emphasize right out the gate that yet again, here it is at the end of the day, Iran effectively is in control of the Strait. They are actively codifying and making that control more ingrained and palpable every day. There are rumors that the Iranians are now charging $2 million a ship for ships to flow through their waters, which you can see up there. In the corner there, the route ships are taking, right, going around Iranian islands and through their territorial waters to be inspected to make sure they are the ship that's been approved across. There's the negotiations are going on with countries like India, China to get those countries' tankers flowing through. So the checkpoint is alive and well. It is still very much controlled by Iran. Every day the political clock counts or ticks. The damage from this goes up, the pressure goes up, and despite all that, though, somehow we've got Trump over here talking about how he's given a gift. I'm not really sure what he exactly meant there, but I guess 10 Iranian tankers of oil, or more are being let out into the world to be sold to sell their oil. Even though also I guess he, once again, Groundhog Day at the Pentagon and the White House, he also talked about everything had been blown up, explode up, all the explosions had happened, everything had been exploded away. All the Air Force, all the Navy, there's nothing left, even though we're about to just, blow the fuck out of everything, clearly. We're surging a bunch more assets into the region, 82nd Airborne. We've got the amphibious ready groups coming in, all the other aerial assets, et cetera, that we've talked about. But anyway, he's over there Groundhog Daying it like him and our favorite boy Pete Hegseth do every day. We blowed everything up. We're razor focused. And but today's going to be the biggest day of strikes you've ever seen. But we're also letting Iranian oil out into the world and selling it. And also the head of the IRGC Navy, Iranian Republican Guard Navy was killed in an airstrike. I mean, sucks for him. Obviously, he's dead, but do I think this changes anything kinetically or tangibly in the battle space? No. Despite what Yahoo here and Trump and Hegseth are going to tell you, and a bunch of other people are going to tell you, I don't see how this really changes anything. The Iranians have been taking withering assaults on their command, control, and ISR infrastructure for weeks now, and have demonstrated that they have been reconstituting them and adapting them rapidly. The rate of Iranian strikes on neighboring states and Israel is up every day. The precision of those strikes seems to be getting better. The lethality and really not even the lethality, but really the effect on the battle space, the effect on the operational strategic picture and dynamics continues to get better, right? And I have no doubt that the Iranians are well prepared to really ratchet up that escalation ladder once operations get the Strait open, really kick off. And there is not going to be negotiated settlements anytime soon. It's just there's no off ramp here. The three belligerents in this conflict are just not on the same page at all. And two of the belligerents who are supposed to be fighting together really aren't totally on the same page either. So we're going to see what happens. But the Tripoli is coming. You can see it down right down in here. It is coming on station any time now. It might be on station right now with its 2,500 Marines and aerial assets. And yeah, other than the ongoing strikes of infrastructure throughout the Gulf, what did I just read? I think the French industry minister announced something like 30% of all Gulf infrastructure has been damaged or destroyed at this point. So that's the other thing too. The longer this drags on, I talked about this before, the longer it's going to take to rebound from this. All that infrastructure has to get repaired and replaced. The Qataris are already saying 3 to 5 years to get the 70% of their primary gas field back online. And even if those are inflated numbers under good conditions, right, with everybody scrambling to get parts, to get technicians, to rebuild stuff, and especially if this goes on for a long period of time, where potentially some of this has to occur maybe under fire, right, or in hostile conditions, contested conditions. You know, you're trying to repair the oil facilities, you know, in the UAE or in Qatar or in Saudi Arabia or something like that, or other infrastructure. You know, Kuwait City's airport was hit the other day. Big fuel depot blew up. There's a very real possibility that things like that are going to have to be dealt with in this contested environment. You know, it's not like every day that site's going to get hit, but there is no reason to think, especially something critical like an oil refinery, while it's being repaired, would not be hit again. And we're seeing more and more videos coming out of FPV drones operated by Iranian proxy actors, especially in Iraq, flying them into U.S. bases in Iraq and striking them. The Iraqi government also seems like they're pretty down for these militias, which are technically actually part of the Iraqi government security apparatus. Seem pretty cool to let them do whatever they want to the American bases and personnel and equipment in their country, based both on action and official words. So, you know, that long war we fought there really got us a really strong, useful, committed ally in all of this. And there is the very distinct possibility that a whole nother front, or maybe a better way to put it, an escalated, Iraq could become a very hot front in this war. Iran could really try to use Iraq as a way to really try to strike out at the U.S., especially in this coming period. So, oh yeah, and lastly, down here in the bottom, obviously, you know, the Northwest Salient, Lebanon, the Israelis continue to make ground incursions. They continue to appear to be pushing with ground forces to the Litani. By all estimates, by all accounts, they are gonna go for it and try to create that buffer zone between their border, northern Israel, and the Litani in southern Lebanon. We're gonna see over 1 million people displaced already, well over 1,000 people killed. I don't have any idea on wounded at the moment, but I'm sure it's a lot. Hezbollah is definitely fighting back, firing rockets, missiles into Israel and at ground forces in Lebanon. The Israelis continue their relentless air and long-range fires assault on Lebanon and Beirut in particular. It's a fucking mess there. And just like everywhere else the Israelis are fighting, they don't seem like they're going to let up anytime soon. And they seem pretty into the idea that they're just going to take everything that they can that's ever had people they didn't like them and fucked with them. And if they can't take it, they're going to make sure that they're just, you know, blow the heck out of it all the time. I mean, they blow stuff in Syria up all the time too. So, and you know, I to some degree I can see that perspective, right? If I was an Israeli. But I think it's also probably, you know, not making it easier to get out of this mess we found ourselves in. And certainly, again, when, you know, the Israelis will just blow up negotiators in a friendly country, nonetheless, in Doha, I believe it was, in Qatar. Maybe it was in the UAE. One of the two. One of our biggest Arab homies, right? As huge U.S. presidents, either one of those countries, right? And the Israelis just have the audacity to blow up some Iranian negotiators in that country while we're trying to talk to them. So, again, Trump can turn off the war and it won't really matter. So here we go. Tomorrow, this is kicking off. That's what I'm calling. And if it doesn't happen tomorrow, I'm sure it's happening the next day. I don't know. Trump can't wait any longer. He's gotten himself way too up this escalation ladder. So, okay. That's it. I hope you enjoyed it. This has been the Land Commander Gulf War 3 update for March 26, 2026. You'll probably see it on Friday, the 27th. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. I've certainly enjoyed it. I hope this is working better. I think this is working better. I think we're getting closer on this really looking, kind of slick. So yeah, right on. All right. As always, reach for the lasers, embrace those lights, and I'll see you next time.